So my name is Ashlyn, and I am calling in from Social Enterprise, Minneapolis, St. Paul. We support social entrepreneurs, social enterprises, and nonprofits with revenue generation streams, and we're really excited and lucky to have Tom and Sara from 20 Degrees who will be supporting us on this session. They are experts and consultants from Washington, D.C., and they have amazing ties to the Twin Cities. And so we're feeling very lucky to have them leading a conversation with us today. So if you feel comfortable, we'd love to hear from you and hear what organization you're representing today. We'll just wait just a few more minutes before we get started. Hey, Tom, how's it going?
It's going well, thanks. Thanks for having us, Ashlyn. We're really excited to be here with you all today.
Yes, absolutely. How are things on Sara's side?
I think we are making progress. She might be a minute, so it's okay if we get started too, I know. But I think your prompt of hearing who else is on the line would be really helpful for me. So if folks are comfortable sharing where you're and maybe even just like the kind of organization that you're either representing or working at now, that would be really helpful too, so we can tailor content.
Yes, so please just introduce yourself, your organization. Are you calling in and representing a nonprofit or a social business? We'd love to hear from you. Oh, hey, Temmie. Good to see you. Oh, yes. This is a great session for you. I'm so glad you're here.
Excellent.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to share my screen. So Tom, you can tell me what you see.
Yeah, absolutely.
And make sure that you can see the presentation.
Yeah.
And then I'll just have you let me know when to move forward.
Excellent.
So
that's great. That's excellent. I can see it. Can everyone else see it? Maybe yeah, we're all good. Okay. Well, thanks again to Ashlyn. I'm Tom Bartlett. I'm co-founder of 20 Degrees. My business partner Sara should be joining us here shortly, and appreciate everyone's patience while we get her on. Just a quick shout out to Ashlyn and the entire Social Enterprise MSP team for bringing us into this conversation, being part of Startup Week. It's really exciting for us. And we have a lot of shared values with the Social Enterprise Alliance, and we are just really grateful also for Varsha. I know you're on as well, for all your help and prep in getting us ready for today. We're here today to talk about the problem that Sara and I fell in love with around revenue scarcity, and our solution for finding new pathways to revenue and capital for nonprofits and for social enterprises. These are far from typical times. We get it. In fact, when COVID hit, the mantra that we started to use within our firm was that we would be the calm in the storm. And so we hope today that we can bring a bit of that into our conversation. We know there's a lot happening in this moment. So we're going to be talking about revenue. We're going to be talking about capital, customers. We're going to have nods also to videos with squirrels, truly. And we hope that we can leave you a bit with a clear pathway for how you can resource change and for testing that idea with real customers. So before we dive in, I think it's helpful to understand a bit of my Minnesota connection. I'm from Minnesota, was born there, and spent a lot of my time with my grandfather on the banks of the Mississippi River. He lived actually in the Seward neighborhood on Seabury Avenue, if anyone knows where that is, and spent a lot of time walking between the falls and the Franklin Avenue Bridge, skipping rocks. And so for us, as we were thinking about starting our company, I really started to reflect back on my grandfather and all those times that we had skipping rocks on the banks. And this is something that for me felt really difficult when I first started skipping rocks. And my grandfather was one of those people in my life who first introduced me to social justice, racial justice, how to show up as an ally and not a savior, which is frankly something I'm still unpacking. But through that patience that he had, he showed me that I could actually skip a rock on water, that it wouldn't sink, that there was a method, a process, and actually the right angle, 20 degrees, by the way, is the right angle to skip a rock on water. It's the ideal angle. And through that, the rock could really live to its full potential. And Sara and I believe that fully, that when people have the right method, process, and pathway, and the right angle for bringing in these revenue ideas, access to these new forms of capital, access to new runways and new pathways for revenue are truly possible. And so we've been out for the past couple of years, really taking this around to our clients and other customers. And it's been a really exciting journey. So my background is a little bit as a funder. Sara is a development professional. And so bring that context to our conversation today. So as Ashlyn, if we could go into our first slide, we thought it might be helpful actually to have a quick conversation around framing. And we know that there's a wide variety of folks who are attending, those who may be coming from a social enterprise lens, a real startup lens, and those who may be coming from a nonprofit lens. So the headline, if you tune out for the next 20 seconds, is that this presentation is for you, regardless of where you're coming from. And what I would offer is that for social enterprise folks, speak to you for a second, this is really hopefully something that you all have been beginning to become part of a conversation, an ecosystem. So these concepts probably won't be new. Some of the ways that we present it and share it hopefully will be a little bit new and repackaged. And to our nonprofit folks, I think the challenge and opportunity for you here is to really lean into a bit more of that startup mentality and breaking free of what I think, having spent some time in the nonprofit sector myself, we have this tendency that things have to be perfect before we bring out our new solutions and new ideas into the marketplace. And that is the opposite of what we need to really be embracing, particularly in this moment, because our communities and those that we're seeking to serve really need these ideas to hit the market as quick as possible. And so the whole conversation we're going to have today is helping bring those ideas out as quickly as we possibly can. So with that, let's go to our next slide. So a quick poll, and we can just throw it in the chat. Why do you need money? For what purpose does your business currently need money? And all of us would say we need more money, of course. But if you were to get $1,000, $10,000, even $100,000 tomorrow, where would that money go? So quickly in the chat, if we can, let's talk about why you need money for your business. And I will wait until we start to see the chat move. Okay. Thank you, Terry. Yes, that's real. Talent growth, paying staff. Excellent. Excellent. Well, as we wait for some other responses to come in through the chat, the point of this slide here is to really begin to think about whether or not we're talking about need for revenue or need for capital, because those are very different things. And so typically we think about revenue being something that can help us really, to the point I think Terry is talking about, get back to a steady state, continue to pay ourselves, pay our staff, keep money flowing, and growing at a bit slower of a pace. With capital, we're talking about huge infusions of cash that can help really propel the business forward. But that requires a whole separate set of considerations. So with that, and Ashlyn, I just lost the screen share. I don't know if you want to go back to that if we can.
I will in just a minute.
Sure.
I think I'm going to try to let Sara in.
Oh, great. Good.
Oh, wait. It does see that she... Yep, I'm not sure. So we'll just keep moving forward. Okay. And I will share my screen. Thank you for your patience.
Of course. Yeah, and I'm just looking through the chat here while you're doing that. So Christian laid out funding new incubated projects, Amy paying staff and funding projects, Katrina paying staff, talent growth. Excellent. So as we dive back in here, one of the things that we want to have a quick conversation around is around revenue and capital. And so quick, there is no real right answer. Only you can. There are viable pathways for whether or not to pursue both, or viable strategies, I should say, whether or not you want to pursue revenue or you want to pursue capital. But each comes with its own set of strings and springs. So from the revenue standpoint, the strings are that it's a little slower to grow. You grow as fast as you can acquire customers, and that requires patience. It also requires having a little bit of cash on hand in order to weather when that revenue starts to come in. So it can take some time. On the upside, though, you're not giving up any control, and you're not having to indebt yourself into others as you seek to grow your company. So you have a bit more, again, control over the growth. As we look at capital, the strings are real there. When you start lenders or investors into the company, they are either going to they're going to demand that they get repaid, first of all. Investors are going to own part of your company, so you've lost some of that control. But on the upside, you now have real money that can help propel the company forward. And so those are real considerations as we think about whether or not you need revenue. And so to some of those who are saying we're replacing lost income or seeking to pay staff, and if we're talking about existing staff, maybe not new staff, revenue might be a better pathway. As we think about capital and increasing flexibility, or really thinking about growth for the business around new projects or bringing on new staff, that might be a capital conversation. So let's go into talking about the money. When we first started building this out, we were going to drive into the revenue process, but realized everyone gets excited about the money. So let's talk about capital first. So Ashlyn, we can go to the next slide. Okay. Often when we get presented with capital and all of its forms, we think about this, and you probably have all seen it, this linear spectrum from debt, meaning sources coming from banks or other lenders that you have to repay, to equity, where someone owns a part of your company but it gives you money and buys shares in what you're doing. And I think that's not always the most helpful. Sarah and I both don't think that's always helpful, and she would say the same if she were here. But that rather, there's these three different, essentially, universes that we're operating in. And the first being this open ocean, and it's a place that many of you might actually be right now, where and if it's new, while it's scary, it's certainly something that's been done before, and there are pathways to get there. So many of you might be doing self-funding right now, or asking friends and family for help, getting grants to accelerate that work. The next is the Moonshot, and this is really where angel, crowdfunding, some of the others that we have here are. And we even have traditional bank loans here on purpose. And I don't know how many folks are familiar with the stat, but only 17% of entrepreneurs are eligible for traditional lending and traditional financing. So for most of us, this is actually a moonshot. And so we have that here. But we've helped a number of clients, and both from nonprofits to social enterprises, access this kind of financing. And it really, and we'll get into the requirements, but this is something that is a knowable pathway. And as we get into kind of what we call beyond Neptune and deep space, this is the opportunity zone financing, outcome-based financing. In fact, Sara was part of a Pay for Success deal. So this is also called Pay for Success or social impact bonds. We've helped clients as we've run our own accelerator to help returning citizen entrepreneurs connect with opportunity zone funders. So we've seen this, but this is really deep space. You need to be prepared for that, for the mindset that you are going to be entering rarefied air as we go into this work. So let's talk a little bit about the requirements, if we can, Ashlyn. So if you're going to go out in the open ocean and go to seek this this first form of financing, you still have to have really clear and strong financials. You have to have often good personal credit because you may not have enough track record. Your business, if you have an existing business, may be able to lend a little bit more on that. But in most cases, it's on you as you start up. Got to have a solid plan, a pitch deck, and even some customers. You got to be able to show that you've got some opportunities to grow this customer base. We all, and many of you may have written your own grants, but it takes time. It takes a lot of time and patience. So you got to be ready for that, and a willingness, if you're going to go after SBA funding in particular, or other collateralized loans, to put up personal guarantees on that kind of money. So again, comes with some strings. As we go into the Moonshot, unless you have a legal or an accounting background, you're going to need that help on your team as you go forward and begin to negotiate this kind of financing. As we go to, thank you. I think Sarah's watching me from the seats. So thank you, Sarah. If you can, feel free to channel other ideas as you see fit. So the other key thing here is to prove product market fit. So this is a term where people may have heard it, but where we really start to see that your service or solution is really meeting the market, and you see real excitement around the customers beginning to come on board. There's a lot of other ways to indicate if we have that, but you're going to need to start to show that for investors, real traction, and often your product has to be at a place where you've been in business or past an MVP stage for some time. And as we go into Neptune and deep space, this is really where you have to have $1 billion idea, truly. And the kind of scale that people, and being ready to get on a roller coaster ride. And as you've heard probably from a lot of folks, once you get on a venture capital ride, you can't get off. Your exits are either you go IPO, you get acquired, or your business fails. And so being prepared for that kind of an outcome is really important before you take on any type of venture conversation. And you really have to be able to be ready for what often investors are going to be demanding of you. So this is not for the faint of heart. You're going to be often many of us go into business to work for ourselves. And you go down this path, you're working for these investors. And so some people are okay with that. Again, it's your call to make, but just know what you're getting into before we do that. So next slide, if we can, Ashlyn, begins to talk a bit more about a checklist that we should really think about as all of us consider how we're going to bring on and think about capital. So first, do you have proof that people actually have this problem and that your solution fixes it? Do you have an actual budget for what the money is going to go for? And you have to be able to answer pretty quickly, if I get this capital infusion, this is what I'm going to spend the money on. Do you have that written down? Has it been tested? Do you have financial statements? And if there aren't like real numbers, are they pretty solid projections, particularly around cash? Because especially in this moment in COVID, people have cash, and whether or not you have enough runway to be able to sustain the operation before you get to some real traction points. Now, these next two are really critical. We can't do this alone. I benefit greatly from having an amazing business partner, and she and I have a deep network of advisors who we do this work with day in and day out. But you really need to have someone who can help you think through some of your blind spots. And it's really important, particularly for some of the maybe entrepreneurs on the call who may not have deep benches at this point. And lastly, reach out to those folks who you may have come in contact with who have gotten this kind of financing. So let them tell you what their story was like as they get, as they talk a little bit more about that journey. And it's really important that everyone take time to do that so that we all walk into these financing conversations with the eyes wide open. If we can, Ashlyn, go to the next slide. And what we want to talk about here is, if you don't have a business, we got to talk about having an actual business, because no one's going to give you capital if we don't actually have a revenue model or a basis for actually being able to grow the company. And so let's come back down to the ground here, where we got to talk about building revenue. And here's our roadmap. And I think one of the things that's most important is this first step. Really, and I'm guilty of this. I'm an engineer by training, and I've worked at the board level, and Sara can speak to this from her time on staff. It's easy in the nonprofit context to fall in love with your solution. Really easy, in fact. And often that's the exact opposite approach we need to be taking. We have to fall in love first with the problem, because solutions need to change as the problem changes. In fact, our first solutions are never going to be right and sustainable in the long run. And so we have to be in love with the problem. That has to anchor us. And we have to find that customer who feels this problem so acutely that they're willing to buy something that's totally imperfect, because even that is measurably better than what they've been experiencing up until now. And so that pursuit of the problem and that customer should really be at the very start of this entire process. And from there, we'll go into an example. It's important to complete a lean canvas. It's a basic business strategy on one page, and not a full business plan yet. You don't know enough yet to build a plan. It's not anchored in reality, so don't waste the time in building a plan. Build a lean canvas first. It's a really great tool. We'll show you one that we like from the Stanford Business School. It's a bit more adapted to the social innovation context. And from there, though, it's about getting to know your customer. Again, the most important thing in these first 3 steps is to build that customer empathy map, really begin to build that understanding around what your customer needs, wants, what they feel, what are their pain points. Don't just assume that you know all that. You have to go into the community, into where these customers are, and really make sure that we're understanding what they're feeling in this moment. From there, it's building an MVP. And a quick note here, I'm going to say it several times throughout the rest of the time that we have, is it's really important that we build the MVP for the purpose of making sure we've understood the problem, not that we've got a viable product yet. This is a truly scalable product, I should say. The MVP is your minimally viable product, your cheapest, quickest solution to help you get feedback on whether or not you've understood what customers really feel and want. And from there, it's refining and building the idea. So let's keep going, Ashlyn, if we can. If we can play the quick video. Okay, we can cut it there. So you may be wondering why in the world we have brought in Scrat from the Ice Age. Well, Scrat is actually a perfect example of what the perfect customer is. He's someone who has been trying relentlessly to bury this beloved acorn, has tried a number of ways, can't break through the ice, and when he finally does, creates monumental calamity. So clearly his solutions haven't been working. He's been trying to find them and is desperate for someone for some help here. And this is an example of an avatar for the perfect customer. Ashlyn, if we can go to the next slide. I think I lost the screen share on my end. Sorry, one second. Thank you. So this is a really we don't have enough time to go into this today, unfortunately. I would love to spend more time here. But here's a quick checklist that we really think is important. Everyone jots down and begins this process around naming this problem and beginning to identify customers that really acutely feel this problem. And for our nonprofit folks in the room, these customers at this point can be beneficiaries. So encourage you to think about 3 of these customer segments, different customer groups, and be specific. Which of those 2 have been actively looking for a solution, like Scrat, trying to get that acorn into the ice, and those pain points that they're feeling. What does it mean to them if they can't get this problem solved? How is that affecting them? Begin to identify those ways that your process, venture, program, whatever, begins to address those pain points, and name one of the segments who actually has enough money to pay for it. Spend a ton of time on here, more than you think is even reasonable. Of all the places in this process, customer discovery is the most fundamental place that you need to spend. So let's give a quick example if we can, Ashlyn. And we actually used a nonprofit example because I think it's easy in some ways to think about this from more of the startup lens, but harder if you're an existing entity to think about how to grow it. So we got a really amazing client that we've worked with here in the DC area. They're Joe's Movement Emporium, a Maryland arts nonprofit. And they had this problem around enrollment in these community classes. So they're a movement, dance, and other creative expression space. But we're really having this transactional relationship with Joe's, with their local residents, with Joe's. And as a result, they were seeing pretty minimal revenue coming in off these class subscriptions. And they started to break it down into who was actually using this service. And so they had artists who were coming in, parents, and even residents over 65. And they started to think about who actively do we see most coming in to trying to solve this problem around us. And it was the artists and the residents over 65. Residents over 65, their pain points as they started to narrow down on this particular customer segment was this: there really weren't affordable dance or movement options in the local area. They live in an area that has been divested in for many decades. And so as a result, there really isn't a wealth of opportunity for folks to get connected to this kind of expression. That leaves these residents feeling very isolated and with a deep longing to connect. So as they started to think about how could we begin to address this through our services, they began to build more of a community membership model, so that they're actually leaning into their mission around creating community, and created a new subscription service where folks could, instead of picking off one-off classes, had through a small fee each month an array of classes that they could sign up for that met more of their schedule. And so they changed a bit about how they were working and contracting with some of the vendors. But at the end of the day, what they did was put out a solution that wasn't perfect, and these 65 plus residents started to pay for this subscription, and has even survived much throughout COVID. It's allowed them to expand into some new localities. And the whole point here is they went forward with an imperfect solution to see if they were starting to address the needs that they were identifying in the community. I see that I'm by myself now, so maybe I lost Ashlyn. Can you all just a quick pulse check in the chat? Are you all there, or is it just me? Awesome, Christian, appreciate you. Great. All right, thank you, Kira. Excellent. Well, I appreciate all of you for sticking with us through this. We have I have about 5 more minutes, and then we're hoping to have some Q&A, and I want to quickly talk about some of the MVP. And is this a term, just super quick? Anybody who has not heard of MVP, if you can put yourself in the chat. Okay, so I'm going to assume that everyone's heard of this concept of the MVP. Welcome, Ashlyn. If you are able to put the slides back on, that'd be great. Thank you.
I'm trying. I'm not totally sure if I can, but I will
Okay.
definitely do what I can. But keep going on the MVP.
No worries. Okay. So the point of this MVP is really to make sure that, again, it's not a perfect solution. It's the thing that you can build most cheaply and quickly, with the point being, did you understand what your customers were feeling? And this is something I think again, I go back to what I led with at the beginning. It's antithetical to how a lot of us have been raised or grown up around, and particularly if you come from more of an established institution, you never go out to market with something that isn't perfect. But that's exactly the type of risk and the courage that is required to put forward this solution. And the hope is that you can begin to get real feedback from those customers to tell you whether or not you're on the right track. What I would offer as we move to our closing here is going back to make sure you understand whether or not you want revenue or capital in order to grow your business. If you need capital, then make sure you understand what universe you're signing up for, whether or not you're signing up to be a sailor, an astronaut, or a deep space explorer, and prepare accordingly. The other thing I would offer is to, thank you, is to really fall in love with your problem. It's super important right now, right? This is a moment in time where old solutions are no longer relevant, frankly. The problems are evolving so fast that if we fall in love with one of our ideas and one of our solutions, we risk really missing out on delivering a service that our customers and our communities desperately need. So that problem is really important that we ground ourselves in. Seek time more than even feels comfortable to understand that customer, that first customer who's gonna ride or die with you, right? Like sign up to make sure that this is something that is speaking to them. They can be an evangelist for you. They can really help spread the word. You have to understand what is driving their behavior, what pain points they're feeling, what joys they're seeking. Those things that your product or service needs to address if your company is to be successful. Test that idea cheaply and quickly, and really make sure that again, when you build this business, that you're really going after dollars in the right place. What I will offer as we close and go into our Q&A is that this is hard work. This is really, really hard. And finding revenue and building revenue is something that not only is doable, it's knowable, but often requires some dedicated time. And so if people want to have additional conversation, Sara and I are here to help in whatever way that you all need. We hope that you'll reach out. One thing I want to point you to, especially here on our last slide, we can go to the closing slide, Ashlyn. We have a toolkit. We know that these are unprecedented times with COVID, with the Black Lives Matter movement, and because of that, leaders are being stretched in really crazy ways. So we put together a toolkit to help folks navigate the moment. A lot of the scenario planning, cash flow tools, things that might help are all there in this toolkit. And we hope that it can be of use. And if you want more, we'll hope that you'll reach out. What you're doing matters, and if you're here in this room, in this conversation, you're working on some type of intractable problem that people haven't figured out how to solve yet. So thank you for being in the fight. We need you, and I really appreciate you taking time and spending it with us today. And thank you, Ashlyn.
Wonderful. Well, we do have some time for Q&A. I apologize for the technical issues, and I'm sad that Sara's energy couldn't be here. She's a marvelous part of this work. And it's just such a bummer that we missed having her here. But if anyone has any questions, maybe we could go back and look at some of those. We do have a question popping in.
Sure.
Quick tools, development, business plan refinement, etc. Yeah,
absolutely. So the business model canvas and its many adaptations, like the lean canvas, is a really great resource. There's a few offshoots that I think have also been helpful. So one of those is the value proposition. So we didn't spend a ton of time there, but the value proposition, just to define it for folks, is really where we're meeting whatever service or product that we've built is delivering value and meeting the needs of the customer. And that exercise is really, that takes a lot of time to figure out. And there's a really great resource from the Business Model Canvas folks. I think they're the Synergize, the Strategizer series. Yeah, thank you, Chris. Exactly, that Strategizer series is a great one. And they got a ton of resources, both on the BMC, the value proposition, and a few others. They're a great resource. The other is, and we like them, Steve Blank and Bob Dorff wrote a book a long time ago. In fact, I think I have it here, called The Startup Owner's Manual. That's another one that I would recommend as another place to go.
Do you have any specific recommendations or tips for maybe a nonprofit who's looking to add a revenue generation, but they are a pretty well-established organization? Yeah. I know you had that great example. Maybe just some tips on where to start.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for that. Actually, if you want to go back to the that wheel, one of the things in there, and one of the things that I would offer is, one of the most important things to do is to involve staff and to involve your board early in this conversation. What we see not work is when folks at the leadership level go off and start to develop a new idea without involving the right people at the right levels. And so one of the things that we do with folks is we really take time to define values. So as people are thinking about, before they even go and start to get excited about ideas, what is going to be really important to you as an organization, that as you go to explore this kind of revenue, that you are going to essentially evaluate new ideas against, right? Like, what is going to be your criteria for accepting any new ideas? And that can be everything from has to align to certain aspects of our mission, has to bring in a certain amount of money, can't, I don't know, there's a whole series of criteria that you could build, but that values exercise begins to build an inclusive way for frontline staff and board members who in either case might be in a position to essentially kill this new idea from becoming part of the solution, because they often will bring more value into this conversation if we can find pathways in. So starting there is super important. The other thing I would say is that often we have this idea that we need to build something new. And I think in some cases that's true. But I also would offer that there's probably, for most existing organizations, latent or hidden opportunities to monetize products. And that can be something as simple as looking around your space and seeing other peers or others that are working on similar issues with you who are struggling to deliver services, but maybe you've perfected a certain aspect of this. You now maybe have a fee for service that you can package. And so I think there's all kinds of ways that we can get creative about bringing revenue on, from monetizing fixed assets, et cetera. So instead of always looking outward, sometimes it's helpful to look inward to see what else might be possible, and doing a bit of an asset map to identify that.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Does anyone else have any specific questions, maybe about your organization? If you have a specific problem that you want to chat with Tom about, we still have a few minutes left. I want to leave time in case anyone has something specific they want to work through. Well, Tom, are there any like typical questions you get when a new client comes to you? Are there specific questions or things that you often hear over and over and over again that you want to just share with the group that you often experience?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I mean, I hate to go back to the nonprofit example for a second, but I think there's this notion that we hear. There's this tension, I think, about whether or not nonprofits should be even going and entering into the social enterprise space. That there's like a dedicated lane that nonprofit organizations should stay in, and this conversation often moves to, you know, whether or not beneficiaries and other recipients of the service should ever be asked to pay for the service. And, you know, I think there's different answers for whether or not they should, but I think one of my lessons is that I've learned in this process is that beware of making assumptions of who can and cannot pay, and that there's dignity in giving people choice. And so often as we think about new revenue options, rather than making assumptions for our customers, potential customers, it's better to put that decision back in their hands. And so as you all are thinking about that, particularly around if many of you are working in marginalized communities, really thinking deeply about how to get connected with those communities and ask those questions, those hard questions about purchase decisions that people are making, because it's helpful to get to know whether or not you've essentially made a decision or not on someone else's behalf. So I would offer that, and I would also say for those who are just another quick plug. We do have an event on 10/1 if folks are interested about overall giving trends and other things that are happening in the sector. So happy to pass that info on, Ashlyn. That's helpful. But yeah, I think that's just going back to that. Like that's the biggest thing that as my takeaway, and it's a lesson that we're learning over and over again, frankly. But
yeah. Yeah, well, I appreciate that, and we'll definitely share with the group. I would love to be able to bring you and Sara back to, you know, redo this recording, and then maybe dive deeper into some of those, you know, workshop areas. I know we have some individuals when you ask them what they want the money for, I'm seeing a lot of talent and staff, which I know sort of requires from the nonprofit end that unrestricted funding. Do you have any tips or things to leave with the group around just starting to think about something outside of the box or not? Maybe it's that very basic way in which we can ensure that people are continued to be paid for the work that they're doing.
So I mentioned this kind of in passing at the beginning, but I spent over a decade of my career as a funder, and so this is lived experience from when I was presented with these kind of options, and also I think if Sara were here, she would say from her seat similarly, and as evidenced by most of the clients that we work with. When you begin begin the actual exercise of planning to go after and launch a new entity, and whether it's new or like an existing revenue line, or sorry, a new revenue line in an existing entity, as you start to socialize that concept with potential funders, people get really excited and will start to see your organization and you as a leader differently. It's not fair, but that's real. And so often what we see is that when an organization will go to a funder and talk about, hey, we have this new idea for how we're going to serve the community. It's actually not going to be something that's going to be philanthropically driven. We hope this can be a self-sustaining revenue venture. All of a sudden, you're having a different conversation with your funders and with potential investors. You're asking for advice. You're asking for, like, what would you do if you were me? And there's an old adage that if you want money, ask for advice. If you want advice, ask for money. And this is super true in this case, right? So Sara and I have a lived experience where she came to me and I had this new opportunity for supporting some expansion around some homeless services initiative within DC, talked about this new idea, and all of a sudden we're having a conversation around seed capital that could help get this started until they were at a place where the revenue was coming on. And so I think just as people are beginning that, don't be afraid to socialize the idea early. This goes back to finding this mentality of like everything has to be perfect and in place before we present our hand to our community and our stakeholders. And I would just say, flip that. We don't have time for things to be perfect right now. Bring people into the conversation. We've seen a tremendous response in this moment from funders to COVID. They are looking for ways to be helpful. And if you offer them a pathway in for this new concept that puts their dollars in a new place from where it's traditionally been, I think you might have some really interesting conversations and maybe some funding that comes out of that. So.
Great. Thank you. And thank you for saying that, you know, sometimes it's, we have to move fast and that means we're not perfect. So thank you for bearing with me as we learned this new platform, and it wasn't all perfect.
Okay.
But we got connected and we got to hear from the community, and I'm looking forward to continuing to engage with you and Sara and welcome you in to the Minneapolis-St. Paul social enterprise community. So thank you all so much for being here. And we'll follow up with some more information and ways to plug in more deeply with your work. So thank you all so much.
Thank you.